Kaya wanju ninya, nonga boja, jerpanini ninya, nonok boja nyenani, merdich kaya, nyerich nonok. Hello, welcome. Welcome here to Noongar country. We're happy to see you and hope you have a good day.
I'd come to this dark, lonely place and I didn't know how to get out of it at that point.
And I would get this kind of gripping fear because I didn't get this concept.
My hands were all cold. I actually lost feeling in my arms and my hands, and I just started falling. I just couldn't stop crying.
The situation about the family, that still haunts me today.
I was at work and my wife phoned me up in tears and she said, "You need to get home now."
Here I am, I'm living an idyllic lifestyle in 2J now. I'm getting up to 60. What do I want to do for my 60th birthday? It's got to be something really special. And I just finished restoring one of my panthers, and it suddenly dawned on me that I was 60 and the panther's actually 70. So why don't we do something together? So I thought, well, we want to do something together, we've got to ride somewhere. And about the furthest point I can ride from Perth is to Sydney. So let's ride to Sydney. Will the panther make it? Should do. I've spent a lot of time restoring it and spent a lot of hours working on it to get it to be the perfected motorcycle that panthers were always known as being. It was their slogan. And I thought, I know, let's start raising some money as well. And let's join a ride. There's a ride occurring in Sydney that occurs all around the world at the right time of year. So let's ride across and take part in that and raise some money on the way. So here I am planning this ride. We want to raise money for prostate cancer research. At the same time, while all this is going on, I've realised that I get lots of guys coming to visit me. Old cars, restorations, men are interested in it. They love coming and standing and talking to me. And in the course of talking old cars, they'll quite often tell me a little bit about their story as well, and difficulties they've had in life or successes they've had in life. And you get this real interesting picture of people that some have had great lives, some have had bad lives, some have had mixed up lives. As part of this ride, I wanted to give something back. We didn't just raise money via the internet and through Facebook and all those other things. I actually wanted to meet people face to face and rattle the tin in front of people. So we started going to markets and having sausage sizzles. And we quite often get guys coming up, what's a panther? Is that Triumph? Is that Norton? Or I used to know a guy that owned a panther, or I owned a panther. And they'd tell you a story and they'd start telling you about themselves. In the process of that, they'd also start to hear a bit of their own story. I had older gentlemen coming to me and saying, "Oh, you're raising money for prostate cancer. What's prostate cancer? How do I know if I've got prostate cancer?" And at the same time, the ride that I was taking part in Sydney with had decided that they would also put part of the money they raised towards suicide prevention, which again tied in quite well with what we were doing, because a couple of my friends had lost sons to suicide recently.
A friend of mine had suggested we do a Land Rover trip for Africa, and that never quite happened. but I knew I always had to go there. He'd planted a seed, and I always knew that I would go there. And I'd been watching Africa politically because you can't really plan much in Africa because things are changing so constantly. And I managed to do a solo crossing of the Sahara Desert on a motorcycle, and it was one of the stupidest things I've ever done, but I managed to pull it off. I reflected on the thoughts I'd had going back to my early 20s, where I had this sense of foreboding that something would cause me to become unstuck. And I always sensed it would be one of the stupid activities I was involved with, one of my adventures, which would cause me to come to grief. And in the end, it was something that I really wasn't expecting that gave me the biggest problem and greatest challenge I've had to face in my life. Went to the doctor, who prescribed me with some antibiotics, which didn't do anything. Went back to the doctor, and he goes, okay, so we better send you for a biopsy. So off I went, and they took a sample from the tissue in my neck. A few days later, I was at work, and my wife phoned me up in tears, and she said, "You need to get home now."
Street performing was great for me because I was able to I didn't have to write anything, I didn't have to plan anything, I could just get on there, get up on the unicycle and do my juggling and do the thing, and everyone thought I was great, and make all this money, and it was really good. But it's a young man's game, and you can only do it for so long, and it eventually that not being able to really operate with the written word or computers and so forth became, kind of gripping. And I had a girlfriend at the time who was very supportive, and I ended up going to adult literacy in probably in my mid-30s over at the South Fremantle College, and I ended up had a tutor for a year, came to my house every day and really taught me. And basically I was able to get the basics of spelling and grammar and the use of the written word, really. When I was going to college, as I had at school, was just like, it's like I got out of the frying pan and into the fire, really. And, it's like there was lots of parties and so forth, and I just really concentrated on, being the life and soul of the party, and really just getting into drinking and smoking drugs and, going to nightclubs and doing lines of speed and doing all those sorts of things, because it was just kind of trying to find some sense of kind of happiness, I suppose, or so it's find some, because I wasn't getting fulfilled with what I was doing, because I just had these difficulties in being able to follow through what I started, to be able to actually do the work to achieve the things that I knew I could do, or that I wanted to do, and so forth. And that was a thing that kind of really sort of plagued me really for many, many years. And so I had this I would get this fear that I was in some way stupid, or like there was something wrong with me, or whatever. And so that kind of makes you withdrawn. For a long period of time, I suppose I found some sort of freedom in being a street performer, because I didn't have to turn up at a job at a particular time. I wasn't answerable to anybody. I could go and do shows, make loads of money, go and drink really heavily and carry on. Didn't really matter. Come back, I had this capacity to earn a lot of money in a short period of time. I remember I lost my busking hat in Cambridge at this festival, and we'd been at this pub and we all got smashed and pretty much spent all the money that we'd earned, and I'd lost my hat, and I was going, oh man, imagine somebody finds that hat, they would never have any idea about how much money had gone through that hat. And my mate looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "But a house?" And and that was like getting slammed in the chest with a sledgehammer.
I love being in the bush. That's one of my favourite places. I'd rather be out in the bush just sitting down, listening, looking. I mean, the fresh air, the birds, animals. I could sit out all day and it's just beautiful, beautiful as. And in the end, it seems like all the animals and birds and even the trees, the earth, it all like it comes together and it talks to you if you sit there long enough and listen. When I was born, I had a twin brother, and back in the 50s it was early years, and Mum was only just a young'un. She was 17, 18, and apart from having twin boys, the very next year, within the next year, we had a little sister, and who was very premature. And back in the 50s, I believe it wasn't very well documented back then as far as premature babies. Still learning as far as the medical people, go. It's so had a lot of trouble with the sister, and wasn't expected to live really. She's still with us today actually, but yep. And so my auntie, Dad's older sister, came along and decided to help out, seeing the struggle that Mum and Dad had with three of us. So she agreed to take me. Hence, from birth, I was taken away and grew up with another family. And apparently, around about when I'd turned 7 or 8, my auntie passed away. And at the funeral, when we went to the funeral, I remember going to the funeral, and I wasn't allowed to go into the cemetery. I had to stay in the car, and that's when my real mum and dad came along and grabbed me out of the car and took me back. Because I remember Dad saying, well, we can't get into trouble because he is our son. And as a young kid, I remember that. I remember everything. And to me, it's like I was ripped apart between two worlds.
From an early age, I liked pulling stuff apart, and it was mostly electronic stuff. And it was things as simple as our VCR player died, so rather than it going in the bin, I pulled it all apart just to have a look at it and pull bits out of it and make stuff out of that. So I knew that I wanted to work with electronics or electrical stuff, but being from a small town, you don't really have that many options. And all my life I'd known that Dad was in the Navy, and I'd heard stories about Dad's trips around the world with the Navy, so it was an easy choice. The military sounded like a good fit for me. There was no way I was joining the Army, and I didn't even really think about the Air Force. It was an easy decision to go straight to the Navy because that's where Dad had been before. There was one occasion where I'm not sure if we got called to action stations or if I was just on watch up in the ops room, but we were surrounded by a handful of Iraqi patrol boats, and they were sort of coming closer and not responding to any of our communications. So there was a heightened sense of readiness, and being on the console, it was, if we ever had to fire, it was not my decision, but I was one of the guys that was sitting on the console that would have to pull the trigger. Once back in Australia, the ship being alongside, it was pretty much just a 9 to 5 job apart from the duty that you had to do every now and then. So I was going home every afternoon, living your normal life, and then every morning you're back to the ship and doing your normal day job on the ship. But I was really struggling to adjust back to a normal routine, I suppose you could say. I was used to that routine that we'd had for the last 6 months and just working, and then after 3 weeks at sea, you'd have a little bit of downtime and just go mental for 3 days. But yeah, the adjusting back to normal life back in Sydney, I was struggling in the fact that I'd go to the shopping centre to do my just grocery shopping or just to have a wander around looking for some new clothes or whatever, and I'd only be in the shopping centre for a good 5 minutes before my heartbeat would raise. I'd start to struggle breathing. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I couldn't be there. Then there was other times, same thing, going to a shopping centre or just like walking down the street. I just got the feeling that people were staring at me, even though they weren't. I just felt they were staring at me. I just felt like I didn't fit in. Not long before I was due to get out of the Navy, I came back to Perth for a wedding, and that's where I met my wife, Kate. And we were having that long distance relationship for a while until I eventually moved back to Perth and we moved in together. We get married, Kate was pregnant, and unfortunately we lost our son, Riley.
Everybody thinks that I've got it all together, but deep down inside I haven't got it together at all. There's lots of questions. Am I doing the right thing? Will we get there? Is somebody going to get injured on the road? You know, we're riding motorcycles, they're dangerous. What happens if a bike explodes or breaks down? What happens if there's an accident, somebody gets badly injured and all this? As a leader of the project, I suppose, I'm starting to feel a bit daunted by it all. And at the same time, I've got people telling me their stories. So as the ride gets closer and closer, I'm beginning to get more and more self-doubt. You know, I've restored the Panther. Is it good enough? Is he going to be able to ride 4,200 kilometres without exploding? So the days tick down to departure day and my stress levels are increasing. Nobody really knows what's going on in my head apart from probably Linda. And I struggle through somehow. So all this stress was getting on top of me, and I realised that I couldn't stop doing the ride. The ride still had to go ahead. And there were many reasons for that. And one of the most important reasons probably was meeting Jeff and Kerry 12 months early when I made the announcement that I was looking for some extra riders to come with me.
I was sat there listening to him talk. Well, not really listening. I wasn't in a good place at all. My wife was there next to me and she nudged me and said, hang on, this is something you should be involved with. Kerry and I managed to track down Bruce and we nervously approached him because he had asked if anybody would like to be involved with that project.
Jeff came forward and put his hand up and said, I'd like to accompany you if I can, Bruce. And I said, yeah, sure, but why? Why should I pick you? Why should I allow you to come on the ride?
Turns out I've got throat cancer. It wasn't quite something I'd ever expected, and suddenly I was faced with I initially thought, this is it. This is a death sentence for me. That's it, game over. That's, as soon as I hear cancer, that's not knowing much about it, I just thought that was it. I'm done for.
"12 months away, there's a ride, so there's a meaning for him, because at the end of the day, things might not work out well. And I sort of left him thinking, I need to be able to do something more to help Jeff, I think, through this. The ride's 12 months away, and he's got 12 months of potential treatment I don't know. He's only been diagnosed 2 weeks ago, so I still don't know exactly what the full story is. And when I next met Jeff, I discovered that he was a mechanical engineer, and he's an enthusiastic motorcyclist, and he's done lots of long-distance rides through his life. I thought, you know what, I've got another Panther sitting at home that needs restoring. I wonder if Jeff would be interested in helping me restore it. And hey, maybe if we can get it restored in time, he can ride it to Sydney with us.
We had quite a few months to get that bike prepared.
I gave him a few bits and pieces that he could take home and sit and polish or mend or do whatever we needed to do to them. So he took gearbox parts home and panels and plates that needed polishing.
So while I was able to, I would go up to Bruce's once a week, and we would tinker about, and slowly we managed to recondition this old bike.
And in the course of that, we were not only restoring a motorcycle, but I also felt we were doing some restoration work for Jeff as well. It was helping him through this terrible process that he was going to go through.
I was able to open up to him about how I was really feeling, because I had been putting on a brave face when deep inside I was absolutely terrified of what I was going through and what might become of me.
We were talking about motorbikes, but slowly, as I found in so many other instances in the past with other people that I'd met, is that Jeff would slowly start to tell me about how he was feeling, the emotions that he was going through, and how I was feeling with having to face this, this terrible illness or disease. I'm not sure what you call it even. So we would talk. We would talk about motorbikes. We'd talk about what we were restoring, but we'd also talk about Jeff and how we could help restore his health and get him through this and be on that ride next year.
As I came through the treatment and managed to get myself back on track, the bike building had sort of stopped during that time, and then I slowly got back to it, and I realised that I was going to make it to the start of the ride, but it was literally about 4 days before we set off that I learnt I had the all clear and I was cancer free.
We decided that we'd depart from the Maritime Museum in Fremantle. It's a beautiful spot to start, because one of the things I'd wanted to do was to start the ride with the back wheel in the Indian Ocean and finish with the front wheel in the Pacific Ocean, so to speak. And you can't get much closer to the Indian Ocean than Fremantle Maritime Museum. So we'd gathered there. And I'd put the word out to motorcyclists, if anybody wanted to accompany us out of the city or part of the way, they were most welcome to. And I was absolutely gobsmacked when we were at Fremantle, and there was, I don't know, probably 100 motorcyclists turned up to see us off. And the mayor from Fremantle was there shaking my hand and giving me a big send-off. And there was a lot of excitement to go, but there was also a lot of trepidation. We've got 9 days of riding 500 kilometres a day, and will we make it? Will everything go according to plan? I'd put an awful lot of effort into planning it and arranging everything with some help from many great people. But at the same time, I don't think anybody had asked me how I was actually really feeling deep down inside. And it was excitement, but an awful lot of fear and trepidation as well.
It was interesting when I went to the doctor and said, I think I'll go on the antidepressants now. And he kind of laughed, and he said, well, let's go back and have a look, see when we first started talking about depression through the consultations. I've been seeing this doctor for a long time, and he went back and said, yes, well, the first time we talked about depression was 15 years ago. Talking about depression, and it really seemed important because it actually had been, the talking about it was really quite important. And I think, I remember going into the office and saying, I've I've got depression. I've got on tablets for depression. I don't know quite how it came. And really, we were having morning tea, talking about it, and I mentioned it, and like everybody started going, yeah, me too, and it was like half the office was on antidepressants, so, but no one really wanted to talk about it, and we all end up laughing really, and it kind of, you got to know people a bit better, and it that, although I suppose at that time it was kind of really early stages for me in kind of understanding what was going on for me, and it's gone, it's been a deeper process since then, but just that ability to be able to kind of go, yeah, this is where I'm at, this is what's happening to me, and to hear other people saying the same story, you kind of felt better almost immediately, just knowing that you weren't on your own. Steph was also suffering from depression, and she went on to medication, and I saw what happened to her. She seemed to be much better, and I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. So I got on to the medication, got out of the job, and thought, this is great, and I'm going to be happy, but I wasn't. And I, in some ways, it was because that I'd left the job, I'd got out rather than left on my own terms, having done things. Because to be honest, I would say that if I'd have stayed, I would have got the tap on the shoulder. I think I probably should have left 2 years beforehand. The good years were behind. And so far from things being good when I left, in many ways it became worse, because I had this sense of failure that I hadn't finished off this thing as well as I could. And I kind of went into this inertia for a year and started to do small events that were okay, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And that's really when the wheels started to fall off the relationship. And then finally, my wife just said, I can't deal with this anymore. It's too chaotic. I can't deal with you anymore. I don't want to. She slammed her wedding ring down on the table and said, I want to have a social relationship with you. I want a physical relationship with you. This is over. This is finished.
Everything was good at work, except the person that I had to work with. He was forever trying to get me in trouble for whatever reason, whether that was because he didn't like me or whether it was to maybe take the spotlight off of him because he was always in trouble. And I just put up with it and just got on with it, because all I wanted to do was do my job. It started off as a normal day. I was leaving home early to jump in the car and drive out to Northam to a routine job that I'd already planned. And I'd been on the road for maybe 45 minutes or so. And I felt my breathing get sharper. Heartbeat went through the roof. My hands were all cold. I actually lost feeling in my arms and my hands. And I just started bawling. I just couldn't stop crying, and I was crying to the point where I couldn't see, so I just had to pull over on the side of the road, and I just sat there crying for a good 10 or 15 minutes, and uncontrollable crying to the point where I couldn't breathe. But when I eventually calmed down enough, I just picked up the phone and called Kate, and then broke down even more, and that stressed me out a bit too, because I could hear it in her voice. She was stressed. She didn't know what was going on, but I couldn't explain to her what was going on. So I basically just said, I'm crying and I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. I'm sitting on the side of the road and I can't stop crying, all while panting and trying to get the words out. And thankfully she was able to calm me down enough that I could speak properly and have a proper conversation with her. I was struggling to get myself ready for work in the morning and actually going to work. I'd find myself just in the shower sobbing to myself for no reason. I couldn't figure out why. I'd eventually pull my socks up again and get ready and go to work. And I'd go to work, maybe have another little bit of a cry in the car, no idea why. Then I'd get to the office, I'd see his car there, I'd turn around and go somewhere else. Even if I had something to do at the office, I'd just go somewhere else for an hour or two and then come back to the office when his car wasn't there. Then I'd come home from work, and it's all I ever talked about was how much it was driving me insane. And I knew I was talking about it. Like, every subject was just me and work. And I could see it was draining Kate. And I didn't want to start losing friendships as well, because I was talking to my friends about it. And yeah, I felt like that's all I ever spoke about. And Kate was the one that said to me, you need to stop talking about that, or you need to go and speak to someone else about it. You need to go and get some help. I couldn't understand why I felt so crap. It felt like there was a grey cloud following me around. It was just sitting around my shoulder level. There was just this blob of grey just following me around. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't hear straight. I wasn't listening. And it really frustrated me that I was feeling that way because of one person that I was dealing with, even after all of the crap that I've been through previously. Going to 2 war zones and dealing with that crap. Having financial issues due to a bad business deal and the crap that goes with that. And then the worst thing that I've ever had to deal with, and that's losing your child, losing your first child. That was a tough time, but I managed to move on. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was this guy that I worked with. And I couldn't figure out why.
As we got through the Adelaide Hills, the black clouds start rolling in. And suddenly, as I'm riding through towards these black clouds, I suddenly realise there's lots of black clouds in my own head occurring as well. You know, I just get the sense that things aren't going as well as they should, or maybe they are going as well as they should. I just feel like I haven't got the control that I like to have, I suppose. There's so much going on around me with the riders and the bikes and the crew. So I pulled into the camp that night and we sat round, had the meal. And as always, I crawled into my swag, usually before the other guys. And I lay there and it was probably a low point on the ride. It really was a low point on the ride that night where things just weren't right. It just wasn't a good feeling. I'd come to this dark, lonely place and I didn't know how to get out of it at that point. My best confidant has always been Linda, my wife, so I phoned her up. But in the phone call, I couldn't tell her. I didn't know how to tell her. I don't know how to tell somebody the stuff that's been going on in my head and that's probably been going on with the rest of the guys. We just didn't seem to be, in my head, running as a team.
On this particular night, he had very little to say. His tone was really flat, really deadpan. A little bit of a quaver maybe in his voice. I just knew something was wrong, and I tried to do the usual things I do, which is pull him out and talk to him, and I could feel that nothing was happening, and he ended the conversation pretty much by saying, I've got to go, I'm tired. I was like, oh, okay. And that's what he did. He hung up. I knew I couldn't call him back because he's in a swag in the middle of nowhere and he probably wouldn't want to pick up, and if he needed to sleep, I didn't want to interfere with that. But I'll be honest, I felt really worried about him. He's a person who's generally upbeat. He can bounce back quickly, and just the night before had been a little strange, but I was really quite worried. And I guess I'd got the gist in the conversation that there wasn't going to be any value in trying to contact anyone else on the ride to see if they could check in with him. So what I did, I guess I drew on what had worked for me in the past, is that when I get feedback from other people, I remember I'm not alone, and it works for me. So I sent Facebook messages, messenger messages, text messages to our closest family and friends and other people that were supportive of us. And I didn't say very much. I just said, if you ever wanted to send Bruce a message to encourage him personally and about what he's doing, now is the time to do it. And I left it with them, and I just trusted that somehow that sounds wacky, but that energy, that love, that support would somehow reach him wherever he was in the middle of Australia and make a difference.
But I woke up in the morning and sort of started thinking, you know, Bruce, you've got to pull yourself out of it. And suddenly, out of the blue, I started getting all these messages on my phone from people, from friends, from family, just saying you're doing all right. And it helped me enormously. I managed to pull myself out and get up, shake all those bad thoughts out of my head and just get on with the rest of the ride and enjoy it. And the positivity that I got from all those messages, all those little conversations that people were having with me just pushed me on. And the next day was different. The blues had gone and the blue sky was shining, and it was a good ride.
It's not like I didn't see it coming. It's like, in many ways, that's kind of too simplistic. It's that I had known that was something there, but just thought that we would always work through this together. And I suppose in many ways, I look back and see the support that she had given me, which I didn't really see as support at the time, was to pretty much allow me to do the things that I wanted to do, which was disappear into the shed and be on my own, go playing my guitar and doing the things, working on the motorbike, going out on the motorbike, going and finding all these things that I was trying to make me happy, which weren't really actually making me happy. And she thought that was helping me to do what I was doing, but all that was doing was isolating me from the person who loved me the most and who I love the most, was isolating me from my family and losing track. And so to say I didn't see it coming was that, yes, that I knew there was something wrong, and I knew there was things wrong, and I knew that I wasn't happy doing the things that I was doing, but it had never occurred to me what that was doing to my primary relationship, and how that Steph had been left really alone in a marriage while I was off going and doing all of these things, and and not knowing what I was doing and losing the plot, and really, a part of the ADHD is that hyper focus on things that really don't matter. It's when the conversations come in, and once you start to talk to people about this stuff, and that's when to be able to have the courage to talk about to have the courage to talk about what's really going on in you, and you it's like what you're scared of and what you fear. But because people say as men, I don't know, I think it's too simplified. Yes, but I think it's for all people. Nobody wants to admit to the things that they're not good at, or that they feel that they fail at. And once you start talking to people about that, it's people open up. They really do.
When I found out what depression is, I thought to myself, gee whiz, I've been living with depression. I've been living around depression most of my life. But the sort of person I am, if you get to know me, the sort of person I am, within myself, I try not to let depression control me. If depression is starting to take over, which I've just recently in the last few years realised what depression is, I choose myself not to let it get to me, change the atmosphere where I am, change the place where I am, and try and go to a happier moment in my life. With depression, I've realised now, to some people, it's a very serious thing. And all I can say to that, I've learnt over the few years that I've picked up on depression and what it really is and what it can do to a person. And all I can say is, you don't mess with it. You seek help, professional help. There's a new saying now, are you okay? Well, we've been saying that for years. Are you okay? But in a sense of our language, our way. And to be down and sick and somebody knock on your door and you haven't seen for years, I mean, that's medication there. That's medication right there knocking on your door.
I didn't know where to go for help. I knew I needed help. And I remembered seeing an email maybe a few months ago about my employee assistance program. So I decided to pick up the phone, dial the 1300 number and just find out what the story was. And they booked me in with a counsellor. I went along to a few counselling sessions and pretty much spent the whole time crying. It's a bit of a babbling mess, but she was able to give me a few techniques, breathing techniques and ways to stop my mind spiralling downwards, which was good to get me up and ready to go to work so I could function semi-regularly. Even though I had some techniques that the counsellor gave me to get me up and going, ready for work, I still had plenty of bad days. And it was at the point where, right, well, I still can't cope. I've got ways of dealing with each day, but I can't live day by day. I need a long-term solution. I need someone to fix me. So I started off just by going to the GP, and I think I spent most of the time crying to the GP for no reason. I couldn't figure out why I was crying. And we decided to put me on a mental health plan, which gave me 10 psych visits in a 12-month period. And I had my first visit to the psych not long after that, which was tough. It was really tough, talking about myself and pouring my heart out and still not knowing why I was crying. But I felt a lot better walking out of the psych's office that first time. And I was still, even like through all of those 10 visits, I was still up and down, up and down. Some days I'd be going to the psych and felt like I had nothing to talk about because I felt like I was normal again. But then there was other times where I'd just be back down in a hole, and I was looking forward to that psych visit. She gave me some good techniques to deal with day-to-day stresses and how to take your mind off of issues that might be bothering you. So even though I'm not into meditation and all that sort of stuff, I go out in the shed and I just tinker with stuff. Even if I'm not doing anything really productive, I'm just cleaning up the mess from last time. That's my my sanctuary, I suppose, out in the shed.
Suddenly we were into some twisty, windy roads, more and more traffic as we headed down in towards Sydney. And mainly motorways riding into the city, which was very different to what we'd done with all the traffic around us. And being led in by another panther, which was just absolutely awesome for me. And then he took us across Sydney Harbour Bridge, and we rode across the bridge, and this huge edifice, which you see in pictures and you just don't realise how big it is. It's enormous, and you'd feel so small when you're riding this little tiny motorcycle across. And once we'd crossed the bridge, suddenly it was a huge weight gone. We're there. It's finished. There was an emptiness as well, because suddenly there's no more ride. But there was also a feeling of achievement because we'd done it. And one of the great moments for me was as we pulled towards the final destination, which was going to be underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge at the Rocks, pulled up to a set of traffic lights. And one of the guys said to me, "You're the leader, lead us in." And I did. And it was awesome. And that was probably the most powerful moment of the whole ride, was when the guy just acknowledged that I'd led these guys across Australia and we'd achieved successfully. And we'd raised a lot of awareness and we'd raised a lot of money, and it was a success from that perspective. And it was a really important moment, just that acknowledgement that we'd achieved it, we got there, and that I'd led these guys all the way. From all of this, I've learned that the important thing is, if somebody's having a conversation, is to stay in that conversation. Sometimes it's easy to walk away, but the important thing is to listen, hear what somebody's got to say, and if it's the other way around, and keep trying to talk. Don't just give up because it's getting too hard to say what's really in your heart or in your head. You need to be able to talk and get those conversations out and get them happening.
If you know that somebody's struggling with something, if they're unwell or generally having a hard time, reach out to them, make a point to go and visit them, see how they're travelling, because don't just presume that they've got family or loved ones who are taking care of everything. They might not have, and reaching out, but letting them know you're around is a huge help.
The valuable things that I learned was to ask for help, and to say, when people said to you, "Oh, how are you today?" You go, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." Well, actually, no, I'm not fine. And actually being able to say that and to make yourself that vulnerable, and it allowed, it's a bizarre thing, but it actually allowed other people to do the thing that I love doing, which is help people. And so actually it was giving people an opportunity to help me, and people jumped at that opportunity.
There's a new saying now, "Are you okay?" Well, we've been saying that for years. Are you okay? But in a sense of our language, our way. And to be down and sick and somebody knock on your door and you haven't seen for years, I mean, that's medication there. That's medication right there knocking on your door.
I recognise my triggers, and I can see it in other people, and it urges me to just ask something simple as, "Are you okay? You doing all right? Let's have a chat."
If we're talking about treatments for depression, we talk about what can we do to make sure that pesky thought doesn't stay in our head for too long, to take us down the metacognitive spiral and that cascade to lead us to the bottom of the barrel. And there's lots of ways to do that. If people are good at talking, it's good to talk about your problems, not always to a psychologist or a counsellor, but often to family members or people, friends, those in the community around us that are happy to sit and have a yarn, talk about the things that are bothering us. That's a vital part of externalising the internal pesky thought. And sometimes it's not about a resolution, it's just about sharing, that thought and getting it out of your head. Sometimes you can have a chat to your GP about it, and they can sort of work out whether, you can resolve it yourself, because you might have a good alliance with them over time. So you can access psychology through referrals through mental health, through the GP. I suppose if you're working for an employer that uses a employee assistance program called EAP type programs, I know that they can provide pretty good counselling for both the employee and their family regarding mental health. And mental health as a concept and mental health as a wellness and a health is something that when something's going on, we can call all cars and we can say this is a genuine health concern that I've got, and people shouldn't be afraid of that, because living a life with a positive mental health, or a knowledge of your own mental health and what you need to do to prevent things getting to a stage where you're not functioning very well, can actually be very empowering for the individual to say, well, I know how my toe works because my toe's now better. And at the same time, I know how my brain works, so I know how to make that better or maintain that health.
Simple conversations, even with complete strangers, can have a dramatic influence on your life.
When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you allow people to help you.
If someone's not feeling well, we go to his door, knock on his front door. Hey brother, you okay? He'd appreciate the visit, and straight away you'll see the pick-me-up in him.
I recognise my triggers and I can see it in other people, and it urges me to just ask something simple of, are you okay? You doing all right? Let's have a chat.
And keep trying to talk. Don't just give up because it's getting too hard to say what's really in your heart or in your head. You need to be able to talk and get those conversations out and get them happening.
Northwest sunset, bet those southerners never saw. Sky like this before. Pearson's Cove, moonrise, the sky's become a stairway to the moon. It's gone so soon. And I'd love to sing a travelling song, wouldn't last long. My heart's in pain, I wanna feel that red dirt, wanna feel that red dirt beneath my feet again. Nights out fishing at Samson Pier, catching jacks and rock cod. I reckon God beamed this place down from above. This place that I love, the boys out on the back of Sam's ute.
True, and the wind was howling, there was a gale blowing, and we were getting thrown all over the road. The trucks were coming towards us, throwing rain all over us. You couldn't see in front of ourselves. Put her in a bed.
Beneath my feet again.